Welcome, everyone. This is episode 16 of Inner Whispers Radio. This format includes me, Alan, as host. April Crawford is a full-body open deep trance channel, best-selling author, and causal plane entity that we call and have named Veronica, because in the beginning, Veronica didn't like labels and said, pick a name. We did. It stuck. And by the way, everybody in the cosmos, physical and non-physical, knows what we're talking about. Now, before we start, I wanted to, I have a slight theme this time, and I wanted to tell it before Veronica gets here so I don't waste her time. But it's basically going to be about how incredibly individual people and entities are, and there's many different kinds of entities, but how they are individual and multiple, multidimensional aspects of that. For instance, some have different kinds of humor. Did you know that? So, and I'm going to ask Veronica further, questions about that, because I see these in two different, or even 3 or 4 different layers of different groups that are interested in this stuff. And one is what I call what's it all about Alfie stuff, which I'm into, like gravity and, what happens when you die and, what happens after that. Those kind of things, which a lot of people are interested in, but some people find dead boring. But most of the people, I just want to point this out, don't contact us to ask what's it all about Alfie questions. They ask about personal stuff, their family, their relationships, their business. And it's highly specific. And, they often mix, the business people who call very frequently mix, of course, relationship issues, family, whatever, love life, in with that. There's another group, small group, that has projects that are going on, and they might be into, like, okay, next Nobel Prize or whatever, but it's a project, past lives. They want to, it's a series of things. They have very frequent sessions. And then there's others who want to help somebody, and like doctors and, psychologists and so forth. They want to talk about themselves, but also about their clients. Those are the ones who have the most in terms of quantity. But as far as the most in terms of, just percentage, by far and away, it's not about what's it all about Alfie questions that I'm interested in. They're interested in their own personal lives, and they talk to Veronica about highly specific things involving their family, their love life, whatever. And so I don't want to give the wrong idea by this show. This particular radio broadcast, we talk about a lot of stuff that goes outside the main stream of inquiries. So I'm going to hand this phone over to April, and then we'll get going.
Hi, everyone. It's me, April, my little spot for the week where I get to talk. I thought it might be interesting to give a backstory about how all this started. And I know we've already started a little bit about some of the past life runs we used to do. But this group of 4, it was Ryan, Pam, me, and Alan. Those 3 of them were in some sort of channeling class, and I was just there, as I told you, because I had a broken heart. And we started doing a lot of exercises and stuff besides just past life regression, which we took turns with. I mean, Alan did it, and Pam did it, and Ryan did it. And we also, took our turn in bringing people in. And mine wasn't always just Veronica. In fact, this precedes Veronica. One of the first moments we had, and it was probably maybe a month or 2 into this, where we all decided that we were going to do this together. And I had found out, okay, I can do this. Hey, this is interesting. Maybe I want to pursue it and see what it's all about. My biggest concern when we first started was I didn't know what was going on. A lot of times at first, it was like I would fall asleep, and then I'd wake up, and they would say, oh, it was so cool, and I didn't know anything. So I became a little, resentful. It shouldn't be resentful because I loved everybody there, but I really wanted to know what was going on. And so I was negotiating with Veronica and others to say, can I peek in at least once in a while, to find out what's happening? And of course they said yes. So as this progressed, it was like a 2-year period that we did this. Practically 4 or 5 times a week we would do this. And by the way, Alan lived an hour away. And he would drive in after work, and then at 2 o'clock in the morning when we finished a session, he would drive home. So for him, this was a commitment, and it was usually like the weekends and at least twice during a work week. So it was hard on him because he was always, the last guy to leave and the last guy to get home because he was driving an hour. The rest of us lived in the West Hollywood area, so it was like maybe 10 minutes at the most to get home at 2 o'clock in the morning. And most of us didn't have the rigid schedule he had. He was sort of a corporate guy, and he had to be at work at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. So to get home at 3 or 4 in the morning a couple times a week was hard on him. We did a lot of different exercises during all of this. And one of them was each of us would take a turn at like an open mic night where it's whoever wants to come in can come in. And this was preceded Veronica, actually. An energy called Lizette came through one night. Now, the difference for me is that when I left the body, I was kind of walking through a corridor, and there was this woman walking towards me, which had never happened before. So I stopped and said, I'm going to observe this because I want to see what this is all about. And she walked up to me, and she had like darker hair, pretty, but she was dressed like in a period kind of costume. It was like a long dress. I said, well, who are you? And her response was, well, who are you? I said, well, I'm April. And she said, well, my name is Lizette. And then the moment ended, and I moved away like into a slumber state, I think, because I lost consciousness. And apparently, Lizette came in and started talking to everybody. She was a woman, a young woman, who in her dream state was coming to us, was coming through. She was in a dream state, so she was coming through. When she would go to sleep, she would come through and talk to Alan, Pam, and Ryan. She didn't really understand what was going on at first, but what she was doing is as she crossed me, there was also the availability for me to go where she was, but I didn't know it yet. And she would come in, and from what I understand in the transcripts, I just read after 25 years, I finally read the transcripts. I never wanted to know anything. And she would come in, and they would show her things like a refrigerator, or they would show her the gas stove. They would talk to her about technology, and she was very interested in all that. So she went through, because she was not like an entity. She was a being from a different time frame coming through me to explore in her dream state. So I heard about it, but I didn't want to engage it at the time because I was a runner at the time. I didn't want anyone to know what I was doing, and I didn't want to know what was happening because I didn't want to taint anything with my knowledge. So for me not to know was better than knowing, because I felt then it could be colored by what I was thinking. But this went on for a couple of months, and Alan would tell me about it, and so would Pam and Ryan. After the fact, they would tell me what they did with Lizette. And she was from like 16th century, late 16th century France, maybe 17th century France. I'm not sure exactly. But there was a time I'd always cross her in like this corridor, and I would see her, and we were familiar with each other. And one time she came towards me and she says, well, if you just keep going straight, you'll get to where I live. And I was like, oh, okay. So that particular night, I kept walking straight and tried to stay conscious as much as I could. And I came to a door. It was like a really tall door. It was like the whole length of the wall, and it had like a very ornate doorknob on it. And I opened the door, and I walked in, and it was like a bedroom chamber. It was very elaborately done. There were floor-to-ceiling windows, like open windows that opened up out into the outside area. And there was a lot of, I called it satin, but it probably wasn't satin, but satin material. There was lace. the bed had this huge canopy over it. I remember sitting down in a chair going, whoa, where am I? What am I doing? And I sat in that chair just looking around that whole session. And I could feel her when she was done with talking to the others. So I switched and I came back into the space where Ryan, Alan, and Pam were. And they were again chattering all about how that, Lizette did this, Lizette did that. And I just sat there. For usually I had something to say, but that day I didn't. And they said, "Are you okay?" And I looked over at them. I said, I think I just went where Lizette comes from. And of course, immediate attention. They're like, well, tell us about it. And I explained everything that I had seen. And I really wanted to go back because I felt like I was sort of shell-shocked when I first got there and didn't observe as well as I could have. And I'm not sure what happened here, but I know we waited till the next time for me to go back again. And I was excited about it. For once, I was actually excited to go out and let Lizette come in because I wanted to go where she was. And it was a revelation for me because I didn't realize that I could go somewhere. I thought I just had to sort of become dormant and out of the body and quiet so an energy could come through. So this was like a revelation to me that I could actually pass the energy and move in maybe to where they were. Now, Lizette was not an entity. She was someone having an energy, having a human experience in another time frame, and she just had the ability that when she went to sleep, she was able to travel around, and this was her traveling Mullen. Now, I wasn't sleeping. I was just out of body. So for me, even now, looking at it 25 years back, I kind of felt my forehead and go, ooh, that was a strange thing, but it happened. So I went back the next time, and there was really no one around, but one thing that I really remember is the smell. It was like a farm smell. And I looked out the window, and there were lambs and goats and all kinds of, it was like a farm. It was like a country home. And I can remember looking out, and I would see men with sieves, I think they're called sieves, where they chop the wheat with like this curved, like a knife. It was curved, and they were chopping the wheat down. There were several men at a distance also plowing. There were people gathering and I think picking fruits and vegetables from this guy. And it just went out. And I remember stepping into the window and looking out and seeing nothing. There was nothing but countryside all the way around. And it had a farm animal smell to me. That's when I knew that Bobby is in a dream. I'm probably here because I could touch things. That was the first time I touched things. That there was a solid table there. There was, I could feel the crispness of the fabric that I was touching, and it was a very unique experience. And I felt a little afraid at first. I said, well, I shouldn't step out of this room because this is kind of a safe haven. But eventually I did step out a little bit, and I'll probably talk more about that in future weeks. But I just wanted everyone to know that there's a lot of other different things that the four of us did, not just the channeling part. This was like a switch where I switched places with her. And it was fascinating. And I remember coming back that night and said, guys, I got so much to tell you. It was the first time I was involved in the after party where everyone was talking about everything. I had something to say. So I thoroughly enjoyed the experience. And I think it's important to talk about it because a lot of people don't have an understanding of what I went through. And so I'm going to start talking about it more and more and more every week because I think anyone who's aspiring to be a channel should know the different options and things that are available.
Thank you, April. And I'll remind our audience with this humorous anecdote, which perhaps I've used before, but I just love it, and that is to the extent April thinks she remembers what we've done, hundreds and hundreds of things, it would be like, compared to me, it would be like, if I remember, it's like shooting a bullet out of a gun. What April thinks she remembers is if she throws the bullet. So anyway, and there's a lot more to Lizette. It has to do with time. Very interesting stuff, again, segueing into, I guess, what I wanted to talk about, which is what it's all about. Alfie kinds of questions. Uh-oh, I just screwed up my iPhone. So I'm going to ask Veronica to come in, and hopefully I'll fix the iPhone before that happens. Uh-oh, cannot open. Ah, found it. Can I get it? Yes. Veronica is here, wondering what I'm going to talk about next. Let's see. Okay, these are, again, two what I would call what's it all about, Alfie questions, which I like to ask, but it's not why people generally call to talk to Veronica. One is, if you die in your sleep while dreaming, would you continue the dream as a spirit?
Hello, everyone. It is Veronica. And yes, you would continue the dream with your consciousness, which also includes your spirit. And you most likely then would create an atmosphere where you would allow yourself to discover that returning to the physical environment was no longer available. And dependent upon your belief system, you would do that as comfortably as possible.
Thank you, Veronica. And this question is from Cindy. That other one was from Ross. This is from Cindy. It says, if we incarnate over and over again for the purpose of expansion and to rise our vibrational level, is there an end point or goal in parentheses? Are we trying to move to another higher level being? Are we trying to return to our source entity, as I have read? What is the ultimate reason for everything we do and experience? Well, that might be too broad, but let's see what Veronica has to say.
You incarnate for experience and expansion, yes. Imagine your linear life. Would you not still be curious about things when you're 90, as you were when you were 15? So if you're in a life and you've had a couple of lives, you could still be curious and want to open up the energy to the probability of expanding even more. The idea of constantly being aware and the constant movement in your own thought process is something that you'll always want to do. We would say that on an energetic level, being in physical reality offers much. But there are also other dimensional spaces where you can continue the process. There is no real goal like, oh, I'm going to return to source, so I'm going to evolve to a certain point and then I'm going to stop. You're never going to want to stop because your energy and your consciousness is curious and wants to know things and know more things and experience more things. So we would say it's not an endpoint. It is a constant state of evolvement. You can return to source. You can move into other dimensional spaces. You can continue on the process of being in just a linear incarnate. But there is always continuance. There's always life. There's always that vibratory moment that is exciting. Always.
Thank you, Veronica. And just to set a little scene for those interested in such things, we're sitting here in a small office. There are two dogs, two little dogs. I've always had big dogs, but now we have little dogs. And they're here with us. But a cat, my cat, who was hiding someplace in a basket, just came out. And usually I don't kick her out. April kicks her out. But because one of our little dogs, named Guinness, has what they call little dog, big dog syndrome. And so if that cat gets anywhere near that dog, he will chase her, even though they live together. So if that happens, now you'll know why. The theme that I wanted to talk about was individuality and how I've been impressed. For instance, I was going to start a group, kind of a pay-for club that people could join and have group conversations and online, and I abandoned it because I just realized there's such a wide variety of people's interests. I mean, the gambit is incredible, what their different people are interested in, from, what happens when you die, about, my son is giving me trouble and he's in high school and he's an honor student, and then, a lot of other stuff having to do with romance. But also some people have projects or whatever. It's so wide that forget group sessions, they don't work out. Small groups that get together of like mind do work out. But that individuality also applies to the different kinds of non-physical beings and entities. And I'm talked to some who didn't know they were dead. They've been dead for 200 years. They died in the year 1812. And then others who were completely knew that they were dead, I'll put dead in quotes, not physical. But they were hanging out with Henry VIII and all kinds, and not just the royalty, but like the stable boys and the girl who did the wash. That's where I learned, the word bear baiting, for example. I never heard of that, but they were into that in those days. So, but there's another thing about entities that I've also thought about, and two things. One is they have incredible senses of humor. I mean, you'd think it's somebody cross-legged, like sitting on a pillow someplace. They have incredible senses of humor, and in my experience, it's been very dry sense of humor. Now, I don't know if that's their nature to have dry senses of humor, or it's because they know I like dry senses of humor, but it's there, and it's as good as it gets, even if, well, I won't say it exceeds mine, but it's up there with mine. So, but then there's another thing. There's two, you progress. You're an astral, you're an upper astral, then you become a causal plane entity if you're, keep pushing it. But some want to go back and become part of the source, totally integrated with the source, indistinguishable from the source. Then you have others who want to keep their own individuality and personality and their own goals and whatever they do for fun. And Veronica is one of those, for instance. She's not returned to her source entity and just like blended in. Some tells me I'll probably be like that, but there are many others who do. So I guess my point is huge variety here. You think Venice Beach in California has variety? Nothing compared to the variety of the universe. So I was going to ask Veronica about the entities. Some decide to go back to source and some do not.
As in everything else, there is always the word choice. It's not a standard answer. Each of you are very individualistic. You do not lose the individualness of you when you cross back into spirit. Even if you decide to blend into source, you still have the awareness of you and all the yous that you have been in other incarnations. It's not so complicated when you're out of linear reality because there's such stark parameters around linear reality that it's hard for some of you to conceive that, I have other me's. Well, does that diminish the me I am right now? And it's like, no, it doesn't. We think it's important to know that there are those of you who would choose readily to continue reincarnating endlessly because perhaps you do like the physical expression of being. Now, we talk to a lot who go, never again am I coming here. And we'd say, okay, well, when you have full knowledge of all yourself, you'll make that decision. You will remember everything that occurred here. And you take those memories with you, and you can go to other dimensional space and have experiences that evolve you, fairly similar to what linear is, although linear is very dense and vivid as an experience. If you go to another dimensional space, it might not be as forceful. And some choose to have the forceful stuff. So we would say that there are some who say, okay, I'm going back to source and I just want to wallow in the energy of everyone. I mean, that's fine too. So there's no standard, no dictate that says, all right, this is what you're going to do and this is what you have to do. Even reincarnating into the linear, there's no one standing there pointing a finger at you saying, okay, you have to go back. You decide whether you're going to go back or not. And if there's something you want to resolve and you want to wait on it, you can. Ultimately, it is you that make all the decisions. You have counsel from other energies and guides who have gone through the process and understand it. And you also have the unconditional loving energy of your source energy. So it's all there, but you're pretty much the artist of how it all unfolds. You get guidance, but ultimately at the end of the day, there's no one judging you, no one dictating to you other than you. And that does bear a lot of responsibility. So we just want you to think about it and consider it, because it is how things are.
Thank you, Veronica. And before I ask Veronica to give her message to the world, I'll just put this tease out there for, a couple of documentary producers who are talking with me, and maybe somebody you know who's a producer. If you want to do a documentary and you're professional and you're funded, sky's the limit. Nobel Prize level stuff. Archaeologists in particular might be interested, anthropologists, but also just somebody who want to do studies about the nature of consciousness on a very advanced level. Contact me if that's something that might interest you. And so here is Veronica with her end of show message to you and the world.
We understand that in a collective way, you all gather together in your individual moments to give thanks for what you have. And sometimes that's kind of hard to do, especially if you feel like you're in lack. But we think every one of you needs to simplify it down to what you're thankful for. You shouldn't be thankful for material things. You shouldn't be thankful for things that you want to go your way. We think where the thankfulness needs to come in is the idea that you woke up this morning and you were breathing in the air and you were feeling all of the intricacies that physical life has to offer. All of them are beautiful, and all of them have a lot of power behind them. We think the thankful part of you should be very simple, about just being able to be in that form, function in that form, and participate in a world. Now, we understand the world is chaotic, but if you simplify it down and look at a flower, or look at that hummingbird going to the flower, then you can kind of get back to the simplicity of your essence. Because spirit isn't that complicated. Linear reality is very complicated. And to be truly powerful, you need to be in a simple place and have simple ideas and simple thankfulness for those simple things. We think every one of you should go about having this dinner that is very important, but it's also about understanding that life is a gift and to be thankful for it. And you've created this sort of collective kind of thing where you all sit down at the dinner table and share food. But what you're really doing is sharing energy and reconnecting with energy. That's the simple part of it. So when you go to your events, go there with the idea that the people sitting around you are just like you. They have their negative things that are going on. They have their anxiety. They have their moments where they're not happy with themselves or anything around them. Decide that you're just going to connect with them as an essence. None of the nonsense, none of the drama, and see how you feel. And be thankful for that feeling once you examine it. Because at the end of the day, it's all about energy, and it's all about who you are as souls, not so much who you are as linear beings having an experience. So we say, make it simple, make it loving, and most of all, make it unconditional.
Thank you, Veronica. And as I'm fond of saying, this concludes the interesting part of the session. If you want more information, try aprilcrawford.com or amazon.com. Innerwhispers.net is where you can get the free newsletter, which is written by Veronica. See you next time.